Hello, everybody. My name is Misty Delgado, and I am with Relivar Home Care and Alivity Care Advocates. We are a company that takes care of individuals that are struggling to remain in their home, that might need a little bit of assistance to remain there, or additional support services to help them stay home longer as you age. And if that's something that somebody is needing that, you can go ahead and have them give us a call. Our information will be on the screen as we go further. But today I am interviewing Charlene Distler. Hello, Charlene.
Hi.
And a lot of people have questions trying to understand what a trust is, what trust administration is. There's so many components and parts to trust administration. And Charlene owns her own company called Probate Support Specialists. So she is a professional in the industry that you can learn from here today to understand exactly what trust administration is. And then if you have more questions, her information will be on the screen, as well as you can always give her or anybody on her team a call. So thank you, Charlene, for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure as always. Thank you for having me.
And if I could just ask you, because I'm sure people want to know from a credentialing standpoint, how are you knowledgeable in the trust administration component?
Probate Support Specialist has been doing trust and probate administration for the 18 years we've been in existence. I have 27 years of experience. I worked at Macomb County Probate Court. I worked at a public administrator's office. I ran the county's guardianship program, which involves trust matters. And I make it my purpose to stay educated and up to date through the Elder Law and Disability Rights section, the regular probate bar, and the Macomb County Probate Bar Association. So we also act as public guardians, and I'm very proud of the work that we do there.
And folks, if you want to see, we've done a previous recording about guardianship. If you want to learn about guardianship specifically to Michigan, you can look on our YouTube page as well and get that information, that recording of that information as well. So if we can just go ahead and thank you for that. I always say, somebody asked me the other day, like, what would make an individual knowledgeable? Why should I listen to you, right? People say that to me. And I said, well, if you've got somebody who's worked in the industry for 20 years and they're willing to give you some advice or help you understand it, isn't that the best route to go?
When people are in the trenches doing it every day, it's a go-to source that you want to covet, because it's important to know what the most up-to-date information is. Probate law seems to be changing yearly now. In fact, you and I were discussing powers of attorney documents are changing as of July 1st. And that's a segment we'll be working on, educating your folks with. So it changes all the time, and you've got to have someone dedicated that stays up to date with all the changes.
Right. And that's the other question we get from people is, why should I have my wills and documents updated, right? And this is a good reason why, is because the law is changing. Significant change this year, it sounds like.
Yeah. For instance, about 6 years ago, it became obvious to everyone that there was a mental health component missing, specifically from powers of attorney for healthcare. When you have a person who's demented and acting out, sometimes the powers of attorney weren't broad enough and didn't make the statement about how people that are mentally ill need to be cared for. And so there was this rush a couple of years ago to make sure that there was a clause put in for mental health treatment. And that was important.
Okay. All right. Good to know. All right. So let's get to it. Can you tell us, what is a trust?
A trust is a standalone document that hopefully, if you fund it correctly, will shelter all of your assets from having to go to probate court. the main advantage in having a trust is that you are not dragged into probate court. Your assets are protected. There's a couple layers of protection, and the things that you want to see done with your assets are meticulously laid out in a trust. And so you have complete control over what happens to the items that are placed in the trust. And it's, if you don't have a power of attorney, if you don't have a will, these are, you're going to end up in probate court. And you want to avoid probate court if you can, because number one, it's costly and time consuming. And it adds a lot of stress to your loved ones' lives. I can't tell you how many times I see stressful family situations. It's really sad. So a trust is a way of shielding the world from your assets and what you've accumulated in your lifetime. So that's the important use of a trust.
So, and one of the statements you made was correctly funded. Could it not be properly funded?
Initially, when trusts became popular, the attorneys would give you a letter of instruction and say, go to the bank and retitle your bank account to your trust. And in doing that, that moves that asset into the trust. Okay, so it now has that added protection of being in the trust and protected because it's been picked up and labeled and placed in the trust. And that's an important distinction. Early on, attorneys weren't assisting their clients in getting their trusts funded properly. So what happened was people thought, oh, I went to the attorney, I have my trust done and I'm all done. No, you got to look at that page of instruction and make sure all of your assets have been properly moved into the trust. If you have IRAs, those are the exception to the rule. You always want to make sure your beneficiary has access to that. But anything like your home, 401ks, you want to make sure they're retitled to your trust, life insurance policies, those kind of things. So that when you become incompetent or you pass away, all of those assets go right to the trust. They don't have to be probated and then moved over to the trust from the decedent's estate. It's an added expense you don't need. So that's initially when trusts became popular, that was a big problem. People weren't doing the follow-up they needed. And people found themselves, then the children found themselves in probate court having to administer the decedent's estate. And then there's what they call a pour over will. Everything pours over into the trust. So it's added steps and added stress for your loved ones. So if you have a trust, please make sure that you retitle your documents and your assets into the trust. The exception to that is your cars. You don't need to do your car. Those can be taken care of with the Secretary of State with an affidavit. Those can be moved to wherever they need to be done.
Got it. Okay. And then when you say lay out your you can clearly lay out what you want done in the trust. Can you give us an example of what that means?
So in the trust documents, it tells the trust administrator, whoever you've chosen as the successor trustee, if you become incapacitated, it delineates out what you want your care to be. Okay, do you have a long-term care policy that provides for that care so that you stay at home? Or are you instructing your successor trustee to enable a company like Relevar to come in and provide 24-hour, 7-day-a-week care, or however much time the assessment calls for? And these are the reasons why you have complete control. Anything you want can be delineated out in the trust, And the successor trustee has to follow those rules that you've set down. So it's important. It's a wonderful document when used properly.
Got it. Okay. So what then is a trust administrator?
That is the title given to the successor trustee or the successor trustees. You can have a second, third. When we get involved in court, sometimes I think one time I was the 8th successor trustee.
Oh,
There
wow.
was just a lot of family dynamics, and the court decided to appoint a disinterested person. And that ended up being my company. We came in and we became the trust administrator. So we scrutinize the trust. We figure out what responsibilities we have, what we're allowed to do by the trust, and what we're not allowed to do by trust. And then we execute the plan that the settler, that's the person that granted the trust in the first place, is called the settler, what the settler wanted, and we executed that plan.
Okay. All right. So that's the trust administrator. They're going to
Yes.
basically execute what is outlined in the trust documents, then it sounds
Yes.
like. Okay. All right. And so executing the plan, what specific duties and responsibilities does that entail? And, can you just hire anybody or, have anybody do this?
The number one consideration that you need when you're choosing your trust administrator, your successor trustee, is, are they trustworthy? Are they going to execute the plan and not be self-dealing when the time comes, when you become incapacitated or you pass away? Do you trust that person to do the right thing? My sister was the trustee for my mom and dad when they became incapacitated and then passed away. And she came to me one day and she goes, "Well, I know why you didn't make yourself the trustee." And I go, "Yeah, it's a thankless job. It's a really thankless job. You have to worry about creditors. You have to worry about setting up bank accounts. You have to make sure the bills are paid. You have to do taxes. I mean, you're stepping into the shoes of another human being, and you are responsible for every component in that person's life." And so, most of the time you're talking about children who are the successor trustee, and they're worried about mom and dad's health. They're worried about placement. They're worried about family dynamics. And then they've got to do taxes and worry about bill pay and all the other things that go into running this little empire that the trust creates. But it's what mom and dad wanted, and it's the best way to protect mom and dad's wishes.
So does a private individual like that, they'll just say your sister, and maybe it's not in this situation, do they get paid for doing that or no?
In most trusts that I've seen, there is an allowance for them to be paid if they want to. Now, remember that when you are paid for a job, you actually are given a W-2 at the end of the year. So if you draw a fee for doing that, which you are more than able, if the trust says you can, to do that, but you'll get a W-2 at the end of the year.
And so what things will trigger this trust administration?
Most trusts and most powers of attorney are not effective upon signing. Some are. You've always got to examine that when the power of attorney or the trust becomes effective. So there are two. One is the immediate triggering upon signing the document, that the successor trustee becomes the trust administrator.
Okay.
Or the incapacity. So let's say mom predeceased, dad had a stroke. Can't talk, can't walk. They say he'll get better with physical therapy. We've got a power of attorney in place for healthcare, and now we've got the trust administrator, which is usually the same child. It doesn't have to be. And they need 2 doctor's letters, and the hospitals are always really great about supplying those usually. And
Okay.
that's what triggers when there's an incompetency or a death. And so that's when the trust administrator takes the reins and starts acting.
Okay, all right. And then what if someone doesn't have a trust administrator? Let's say they had them outlined on the document and they don't want to do it, or they didn't survive the individual, right? Because those things everything can happen.
Everything can happen. You've got people living well into their 90s and have named children that they outlived, and they forget, right? So make sure that your trust documents always list alternates, at least 2 other people that you're willing to entrust with that duty. The estate planning attorneys that I work with on a regular basis, they list at least 3, and usually one of those 3 will step up. But we're seeing more and more now. People don't want to be saddled with this responsibility. It is a fiduciary position as defined by law. You are held to a much higher standard. Printing things out from the internet bank account is not sufficient. You have to document everything that you do as a trust administrator. And so it's heavy paperwork, a lot of accounting, making sure that things are done timely. If the settler passes away, you have to publish to creditors. You have to deal with that. You have to make sure that all the taxes are done. And lately, the trusts that we've been appointed to, people have not been doing their taxes. They get sick. And so for the last 2 and 3 years, there are no tax returns. So you've got to get all that caught up. But there are companies like myself, my own probate support that will review the matter, and then if it's something we can work with, then we will accept that responsibility. We have a lot of estate planning attorneys calling us and saying, it always amazes me how many people don't have family or are estranged from family.
Sure.
So a lot of times an attorney can discern when a disinterested third party would serve the family best, when the family dynamics are just too, too uncomfortable. And I had a gentleman I took care of. He had 3 children from a first marriage, was married for 40 years to his second wife, and considered her 3 children from her previous marriage his children. In his eyes, he didn't treat them any differently. They were all his children. He had 6 children. But boy, let me tell you, when the rubber met the road, there was fighting in the hospital when dad was dying. And it was, I had to walk in and exert my power of attorney. And I took all the kids to a conference room and told them how they would behave, because dad had been signed into hospice. And just an endearing man. I went in to see him first, and the nurse was shaving him, and he looked at me and he goes, I'm going to be dancing with my wife tonight.
Oh.
And he died that night. He passed that night. So all of his children were there. They treated the situation with dignity and the respect that that man was due, because he was nothing but a gentleman. And then, of course, all holy hell broke loose afterward, but we got through it. But that attorney was astute enough to understand that a disinterested third party was what this family needed. And so there are professional fiduciaries out there. Make sure that you vet them and that you're happy with them. Meet them, go to their office, be really comfortable with how they're set up, and how they communicate with you. It's very important that you have a good rapport with them. There's a lot to know. Our initial interview with people is usually about 2.5 hours long.
Oh, wow.
I need to know if they have pets, how much money I'm allowed to spend on those pets. Should they pass away, and that, let's say they have a 2-year-old dog. What do I do with the dog for the next 10 years, right?
Yeah.
I need to know their religious affiliations and their political affiliations. I need to know family dynamics. Lots of stuff to learn about.
Right.
Yep.
Well, those are wise words, and good for you for pulling that family together, because you can't redo a final moments in life. So
Yeah.
that was a gift to all of them in a way, but I think your point is, and families, individuals, aging folks don't really realize all the battling that can occur after they pass away and how to mitigate that by working with professionals, even outside professionals, knowing when it's the appropriate thing to do is just hire someone outside the family to deal with it.
Yeah, it's a lot less stressful, and it serves to move things along more quickly so that people can get to closure easier. I mean,
Yeah, unbiased and not emotionally connected to decision making. Yeah.
it's a wonderful way to serve people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's our next thing on the list here? Well, how long will trust administration take to complete? So in that instance.
I if the tax returns have been done timely, um, usually about 18 months.
Okay.
It all depends on how complicated the trusts are. Did they own property out of state? Did they own timeshares? If the taxes are
People
all
still
up to
own them,
date.
huh?
People still own them and we can't get rid of them no matter how hard we try.
That's right.
Please don't buy a timeshare. Please don't buy a timeshare. If you do buy a timeshare, scrutinize the contract, take the money and go see an attorney and let them make sure that there's a escape clause or that your children can inherit. So,
That great point there. Great point.
yeah. But I'm going to say about 18 months.
Okay.
Because you've got tax issues, you've got one trust I worked on, Ameritrade would not release the funds to us. And I got to the point where I handed it over to my financial advisor. My financial advisor called every single morning and asked what the status was. And it took us 8 months to liquidate that account. 8 months. And then, of course, you know what that does to the tax returns. It pushes everything back.
Right.
So, and there are tax considerations as well. If you have children who are affluent and they're going to be inheriting a big hunk of money, what's the timing on that? Do we split their inheritance in half? Do they get half this year and half next year to help with their tax ramifications that they have to their estates? So there's a lot involved in the administration. So I tell people right away, it's at least going to be 18 months. So
That's a fair amount of time.
it is, but it's
Yeah.
necessary. A lot of times we'll find out about assets, that Gerber life insurance policy that mom took out 25 years ago. And you go to the escheated division of the state of Michigan and you find out that policy's sitting there. So you've got to administer that. And anytime you're dealing with the state of Michigan, it's 6 to 8 months to talk to them. So nothing is easy anymore. Nothing's easy anymore.
Right.
So you have to, if you're a trust beneficiary, you just need to be very patient.
Yeah, I was gonna say, families, I always hear this after someone passes away. You don't realize how much work this is after someone passes away, and can't even tell you if they were the trust administrator, but in this situation, this is gonna drag out for potentially 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens if I am on the list to be the trust administrator and you know what? I don't have time for it. I'm out of the country, whatever my, reason is. What do we do?
The trust will usually instructs. And hopefully if you have 2 or 3 people, but let's say they all end up declining to act, then normally speaking, one of those nominated have the ability to choose another outside of what was already listed. And if that person would accept, and then everybody's in agreement, then that person can come on and be the trust administrator. Or you can take it to court and the court will appoint more than likely a public administrator who's an attorney well-versed in trust administration. So,
Okay, so if I have one nominated and then they can't do it for whatever reason, then it's typically gonna go to the court system for them to determine who would do it.
it
And
is.
then they'll nominate someone specifically.
The attorney for this petition can nominate who they want. Like say
Okay.
the family says, you know, we want so-and-so, and then as long as there's no objections, usually it's gonna be granted.
Okay. Okay. Now, just to flip back a little bit and say, if I'm interviewing companies like yours to be my trust administrator, what kinds of questions should I be asking?
Are you insured and for how much?
Okay.
That would be my first question.
Okay, good.
And I want to know what kinds of insurance you have. Do you have errors and omissions? Do you have theft? Do you have fraud? All these coverages that are necessary. In this day and age, you've got to see it on paper. You've got to see their documents. You've got to vet them properly. Ask them how long they've been in business. Ask them what their education has been. How do they stay updated on the current changes?
Mhm.
Those, who are your financial advisors? What resources do you have? We have resources here. I have, an incredibly talented, realtor. He's certified in probate matters, and as of January of this year, any house that is in a decedent's estate has to be set for hearing if you're going to sell it. And there's just been too much shenanigans going on with the sale of real estate in decedent's estates. And so the court has decided, and the legislature's decided that, okay, now you're going to bring the matter to court and it's going to be approved and you're going to have a court order. Okay, well, that automatically adds 45 days to the closing date. So you need somebody who's specially trained in probate matters to handle the sale of real estate or even the transfer. So let's say a grandbaby wants the house and they buy out the others. That's still got to go to, you still got to cover all of your bases as far as the transfer of the title of the house. So there are a whole smattering of things that you want to make sure that the proposed trustee, the nominated trustee, has resources to lean on and make the estate move faster. Are you is the family handling the estate sale? Are you going to handle the estate sale? All different manner. How's the house getting cleaned out, and who gets the grandfather clock and who doesn't? And are we sawing it in half, kind of thing?
So that trust administrator is going to coordinate all that?
Yes.
Yeah. So having like a individual, a realtor in-house that's knowledgeable about probate is helpful. And so that would probably be another question. Do you have somebody that's a specialist to handle the sale of my home?
Yeah. Because there are a lot of documents that you can get caught up on when you're transferring a property that's not yours.
Okay.
It's in the trust. So you want to make sure that it's done correctly.
Okay. So one of the things you said was, why should I be worried about an insurance policy or errors and admissions? Tell me a little bit more about that.
The errors and omissions policy are, all right, let's say that I'm trustee of a woman that's become incapacitated and they did their estate planning long ago and far away. Let's say their daughter was their trust administrator and they did Medicaid planning. Okay. Let's say the daughter became ill and couldn't be the trustee anymore and they nominated probate support. Probate support came in and took over, and we're, settling everything into a routine. Mom has to go into long-term care. And because of the planning she did in foresight, she does qualify for Medicaid. But let's say my staff fills out the Medicaid app and we forget to mail it, or I don't respond to the honeydew list that they send. And so we miss a month of Medicaid coverage. The errors and omissions covers that. So when you're talking
Okay.
about $12,000 a month for long-term care, those amounts are substantial. So
Sure.
it's 2 or 3 months. You know, that's a very simple example. But in trust administration, as in decedent estate administration, there are certain timelines that you have to be aware of. You have to give notice to the trust beneficiaries. A lot of people don't know that there's a document that they receive when the settlor passes away, that you are officially notified that you are a trust beneficiary. And
Okay.
so there has to be a publication to creditors. So let's say I missed the publication. I thought I thought my paralegal did it, and she thought I did it, and it didn't get done. So those are things that you want to look for. Those are errors and omissions that the policy would cover if something happened.
Okay. And as far as insurance for bonding, you know, what kind of coverage should, you know, like if my trust is worth, let's say, you know, $1 million, how much would I be looking for out of a trust administrator? What should their policy look like to make sure that I'm covered?
Well, at least $1 million, right, per incidence. I can't, I mean, I think my policy's 100 million just because of the liability that we carry with all different types of estates that we handle. I'm trying to think. Obviously, it has to be at least $1 million because and you want to see that in writing, right? You have the right to look at the deck sheets for the insurance policies because you want to make sure that if somebody absconds with your bank account, then you're covered regardless.
Right. Good. Any other questions we should be asking when we're interviewing a trust administrator?
I think it's more about building rapport and being comfortable with them, that they take the time to understand. Like I said, when we're asked to come on board, my average initial meeting is 2 hours long. I want to know that I can serve the family. I want to know what the needs are. We specialize in special needs trusts when someone is developmentally disabled or severely mentally ill. Those are the ones that are our specialty. And to get to know those people, I visited a gentleman in a nursing home Monday, and they kept saying he needs a guardian, he needs a guardian. And I kept saying, no, he only needs a power of attorney. He does not need a public guardian. It's because they didn't take the time to listen to him. He had a stroke and had aphasia, and he had difficulty with words, difficulty expressing words, but he sure could get his intent across. I knew exactly what he wanted. And to him, he didn't care whether he had a guardian or a power of attorney, right? He just wanted somebody's help.
Right.
So a guardianship can be very restrictive, and a power of attorney, you can delineate out what powers your power of attorney has. So it's more about building a rapport with people, making sure that your relationship will work, that you're comfortable with them, and that they are duly vetted, you know, that they have the insurance policies that they need, that they are in good standing with the state of Michigan, that they've gone through all their licensing with the state of Michigan. And you have a right to ask for all of that. Support presents a booklet. We've got a whole binder that we present to our people. So I want them to be sure that they know that they can trust what we're going to be doing. It's their livelihood. It's their long-term well-being that we're taking charge of. And that's a huge responsibility.
Right. I think too, sometimes a legacy plan, you know, with a lot of people retiring, these days. And I know we do care management, and a lot of just single individuals in the community do it, but they don't really have a backup plan if and when they have a medical crisis themselves. So, for your company and your situation, you're not just a one individual running and doing this type of work, correct?
Correct. I have the company, when the attorneys draft documents, it's always the company that is in name the fiduciary. When I retire, they'll be very, very competent. Carrie will be taking over the company, and she's incredible. She's a Walsh graduate, just an incredible human being, very, very smart girl. And she'll be taking over the company. So there's a legacy of probate support moving on into the future. We're already committed to a couple of trusts that go to 2050. And so, the plan, you want to make sure that there's a plan in place when you hire a fiduciary. Like a lot of accountants will take that responsibility on, but what if that accountant retires and then all of a sudden, where are you? What happens?
Right,
during the
correct,
transition? So
correct.
that's all been planned out here. And
Right.
you want to make sure that with whatever company your fiduciary you're dealing with has that legacy planning.
All right, Charlene, anything else that you can tell us that would be important to know, maybe that we haven't gone over in regards to trust administration?
Well, probate support is a collection of trust administrators and paralegals, probate administrators. We primarily work for public administrators, and generally speaking, we don't work directly with the public. So if they ever had a question though about probate, we would be glad to field that question and get them to the best attorneys in Michigan that do the kind of work that they need. If you have a veteran or a Mason, there's specialized planning for that. If you are contemplating Medicaid planning, those are the kinds of things that the attorneys that we work with on a regular basis do it day in and day out. And they've seen the exceptions to the rules, and they've done the appeals, and they know how to get around things. These are important decisions to make who you choose to do your estate planning. So we would consider it our privilege to just kind of vet you and try and get you to a choice of 3 different attorneys that we know are going to do the job properly. So we serve public administrators, we serve elder law attorneys, and we would always help the public in whatever capacity we can.
And that's so important because so many times attorneys will be doing criminal law, they'll be doing 5 different types of, law, and they might be working on their own without that legacy plan that we're talking about. So finding that right individual is so important. It saves everybody time, and going to a professional like you to get that information is fantastic. So I appreciate you putting that out there for people. And if we can, this is your website up here, probatesupport.net, and you're over in the Clinton Township area. What areas do you service?
We serve all of Michigan as trustee. Conservator, we can go anywhere. Powers of attorney, as long as the recipient understands that if you're in Manistee and I'm in Clinton Township, we're going to do everything by electronics. In today's day and age, there's no reason why I can't be your trustee or your power of attorney and direct what needs to be done from Clinton Township. I like to visit everybody on a regular basis, but that we cover the whole state of Michigan.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. And folks, reach out to Charlene if you have questions about probate, about trust. If you're looking for an attorney, she's a great resource. She's always mine. I got her on my, quick text. Hey, I need help on something. So she's always been very helpful. And if you have somebody who's struggling at home, or you're confused, overwhelmed about your loved one, you're unsure what to do, give me a call and we will help you decide how to take all the stress out of your life, and it comes on us and we'll work through it. So thank you so much. Thanks, Charlene. You're
Oh,
awesome.
thank you.